At 1400 local time, 100 nautical miles north of La Guaira, Venezuela's military high command watched their long-range radar lock onto a single, unmistakable contact. The 100,000-ton giant USS Gerald R. Ford. This was no routine transit. She was anchored. For Caracas, that looked less like a presence patrol and more like a direct message. A $13 billion nuclear-powered symbol of force stationed just off their maritime doorstep. Inside the underground command bunker, the mood shifted instantly. Cold anxiety mixed with political defiance. The immediate response was fast, dramatic, and deeply outdated. The mobilization of 200,000 troops, a massive, desperate answer to a 21st century military reality. But President Nicolas Maduro was about to discover something the hard way. Confronting an American nuclear supercarrier with ground troops is not a show of leverage. It is a severe strategic error, one that risked exposing the fragile foundations of his entire system to the world. Officially, the mission was called Operation North Star, a multinational counter-narcotics surge aimed at disrupting the major smuggling corridors running through the Orinoco Delta and beyond, routes believed to finance the upper ranks of the Maduro government. But the deeper context was much bigger. This was the most serious challenge to U.S. influence in the Caribbean since the Cold War. The arrival of the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, a nuclear-powered centerpiece of American power projection, was more than a deployment. It was a geopolitical statement. With the capacity for roughly 90 aircraft supported by Ticonderoga-class cruisers, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and a permanent force of around 6,000 sailors, the strike group represented a level of deterrence so overwhelming that it reshaped the military balance of the entire region. Maduro, already facing internal unrest, a collapsing economy, and a long history of aggressive rhetoric over the disputed Essequibo region with Guyana, immediately used the U.S. presence to justify a state of emergency. He ordered the mobilization of the FANB, hoping to tighten his weakening grip on power through nationalism and the image of an outside threat. And the stakes were enormous. If Maduro authorized even a single hostile radar lock or any direct military move against the strike group, the U.S. Navy's response would be swift, measured, and potentially decisive. The result could trigger a chain reaction, internal instability, humanitarian fallout, and even a wider geopolitical crisis involving Russian and Chinese advisors and technicians reportedly embedded within some of Caracas's most sensitive facilities. The presence of the world's most advanced warship was not simply about deterrence. It was a preemptive checkmate. Maduro now faced a narrowing choice: step back or move toward an asymmetric confrontation with an outcome that was never really in doubt. So the real question becomes this: what military value do 200,000 infantry troops have against 100,000 tons of nuclear-powered steel backed by one of the most advanced digital kill chains ever built? To understand the answer, you have to look closely at both sides of the standoff. The opposing force was Venezuela's National Bolivarian Armed Forces, the FANB, a military structure shaped more by political loyalty and patronage than by modern battlefield readiness. Under Nicolas Maduro, the FANB has depended heavily on aging Russian equipment acquired during the country's oil boom years. That includes Su-30MK two-flanker multi-role fighters, S-300VM Ante-2500 long-range surface-to-air missile systems, potentially dangerous if properly maintained, and various older Chinese Norinco armored vehicles. But Maduro's strategy was never truly military. It was political. His approach relied on mass mobilization and geopolitical signaling, the belief that deploying nearly 200,000 personnel would raise the political cost of any rapid U.S. intervention. Much of that force included under-equipped National Guard units and reservists, serving more as a psychological shield than a credible combat solution. The real risk to the U.S. Navy was not the visible troop formations. It came from the systems in the shadows. Among them were Russian intelligence elements operating older but still dangerous electronic surveillance assets, reportedly capable of collecting sensitive signal data, along with Chinese-linked communication networks that could potentially relay near real-time information on U.S. fleet movements and communications to intelligence centers in Beijing. Their objective was threefold: track the Ford, provoke a limited incident that could force a U.S. political retreat, and then turn that into a propaganda win to reinforce Maduro's weakening hold on power. At the core of that strategy was a critical misjudgment. They believed that the Ford, as the largest warship ever built, was simply a massive and visible target. What they failed to understand was that the carrier itself was only one part of a far larger invisible system, an integrated combat architecture designed to detect, track, and neutralize threats long before they could act. And that is where the real story begins. The combat preparations aboard USS Gerald R. Ford and her escorts went far beyond conventional readiness. The goal was total domain awareness and the creation of a near-perfect digital kill chain. As the lead ship of her class, the Ford is a floating fortress worth approximately $13 billion, built around 23 major new technologies. Among the most important are the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or EMALS, and the Advanced Arresting Gear, or AAG. Together, they replace older steam-based systems and allow a significantly higher sortie rate than Nimitz-class carriers, increasing the tempo of sustained flight operations by as much as 33%. But the chain of action actually starts far beyond the carrier itself, nearly 1,000 miles above Earth. There, a KH-11 keyhole reconnaissance satellite in geosynchronous orbit confirms the exact GPS coordinates, operational status, and command structure of Venezuelan S-300 VM batteries and major command nodes. That intelligence is transmitted almost instantly through secure ground stations to an E-2D Hawkeye patrolling high above the Caribbean. From that orbit, its AN/APY-9 active electronically scanned array radar builds a sweeping 360-degree digital picture of the battle space. It can detect and track cruise missiles, low-flying aircraft, and simultaneously integrate information from air, surface, and even subsurface assets into a single operating picture. At the center of it all is the Ford's Combat Direction Center, the nerve center of the strike group, processing more than 10 million data points every second from ships, aircraft, and sensors across the fleet. Every F/A-18E/F Super Hornet, armed with precision-guided standoff weapons such as the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, is continuously updated through Link 16, the data network that allows a pilot to see exactly what a destroyer's radar sees, and vice versa. Nearby, Aegis destroyers, including USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, bring another layer of reach and precision. Equipped with the SPY-6 air and missile defense radar, they can track extremely small targets at remarkable distances. Together, this networked, layered system turns the Venezuelan coastline into a fully mapped digital engagement zone, where every potential threat, from a radar site to an isolated command post, can be identified, tracked, and held at risk before it even has time to respond effectively. Venezuela's command structure, by contrast, depends on fragmented and outdated systems that require human input at nearly every vulnerable point. In a modern high-speed confrontation, that gap is not just a disadvantage, it is decisive. And the first true test of that imbalance, a ruthless display of the technological divide, arrives at exactly 8:15 local time. A pair of Venezuelan Su-30 Mk2s, among the most capable aircraft in the country's limited air force, moved in on a high-risk, low-altitude show-of-force pass aimed directly at the Ford carrier strike group. The goal was clear: provoke a reaction. For a brief moment, their fire control radars aggressively illuminated USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, creating a hostile lock, a serious escalation, and a direct breach of accepted maritime norms. What followed happened almost too fast to measure. From the instant that radar lock was detected, the strike group's defensive network began responding in just 1.2 seconds. Thomas Hudner's Aegis Baseline 9 system immediately calculated multiple interception options using SM-2 surface-to-air missiles. At the same time, far above the region, an E-2D Hawkeye detected something even more important. Deep inside Venezuelan territory, a highly directional electronic intelligence system, identified as a Victor-related E-Lint asset, had gone active. That changed everything. This was not just a tactical move. It was a strategic attempt to capture the electronic signatures of the Ford systems, the kind of data that could help map how American sensors, communications, and defensive architecture actually functioned. That intelligence collection effort posed the more serious long-term risk. At 8:18, without any dramatic public exchange or visible pause, USS Gerald R. Ford launched a 4-ship flight of F/A-18F Super Hornets using EMALS, a smooth but extremely rapid electromagnetic launch system that sends aircraft into the air with remarkable speed and precision. Their mission was not to pursue the Russian-built fighters, which were now understood to be a distraction. Their real assignment was far more precise, a standoff strike roughly 250 miles inland against the E-Lint site. En route, the crews received a final encrypted target update through the high-speed Link 16 network, ensuring maximum accuracy for the final phase of the mission. Then, at 0824, the lead weapons systems officer released the payload. 2 AGM-154C joint standoff weapons separated cleanly from the aircraft. Their wings deployed smoothly as they transitioned from GPS-based navigation to terminal infrared guidance for the final approach. Back near the coast, the Su-30 pilots saw Hudner's defensive systems shift into full alert posture. Realizing their gamble had failed, they broke away and turned off. Moments later, the standoff weapons reached the E-Lint site. The strike was not random, and it was not symbolic. It was precise. The antenna array, its power systems, and its stored signal data were disabled in a single focused strike. The Venezuelan Air Force never even had a clear picture of the aircraft responsible for taking that site offline. That moment became the turning point. The United States had demonstrated that it could reach deep inland, neutralize a strategic target, and withdraw without direct close-range confrontation or losses on its own side, all while avoiding a broader exchange with Venezuelan frontline forces. The consequences inside Venezuela's command structure were immediate. In military centers across the country, the first sign of what had happened was silence. Screens went dark, communications dropped, and the ELINT node tied to broader intelligence support was suddenly gone. Strategic visibility had been lost. At Fort Tiuna outside Caracas, where thousands of mobilized troops had gathered amid official rhetoric and public displays of resolve, the mood changed almost instantly. Confidence gave way to uncertainty. The political leadership had promised a confrontation. What arrived instead was a quiet, invisible, highly coordinated demonstration of reach, one that bypassed the massed ground force entirely. That was the real shock. The regime had assembled nearly 200,000 personnel, yet none of that could shield a key intelligence asset, protect core infrastructure, or prevent a precision standoff strike launched from far out at sea. The imbalance was impossible to ignore. A relatively limited U.S. strike package had disabled a strategic system believed to be of major value to regional intelligence operations. From Washington's perspective, it was a striking example of efficiency, accuracy, and technological overmatch. More importantly, it exposed a deeper truth. The large Venezuelan ground mobilization had little real tactical relevance in this kind of confrontation. It could not secure the airspace, shield command networks, or prevent long-range precision operations carried out from beyond the horizon. Within roughly 90 minutes, mobilization orders were quietly revised and then effectively frozen. Some units were instructed to stand down. State media would later describe the ELINT station's loss as a technical issue or maintenance-related outage. But inside military and intelligence circles, in Caracas, Moscow, and Beijing, the message was understood clearly. A key system had been taken offline by a capability they could not reliably track, counter, or conceal themselves from. And that was the real lesson of the Gerald R. Ford deployment. This was not simply a story about one crisis contained. It was a demonstration of how quickly mass conventional mobilization can lose relevance when facing integrated multi-domain warfare driven by real-time data, networked sensors, long-range precision weapons, and space-based intelligence. Maduro's strategy leaned heavily on an older logic: deterrence through numbers, presence, and physical mass. But the U.S. response operated on an entirely different level. When one side prepares with large troop formations, aging equipment, and rigid command structures, while the other relies on linked sensors, encrypted data networks, precision standoff weapons, and persistent battlespace awareness, the gap is no longer just visible. It becomes decisive. This was never truly a contest between Venezuelan infantry and American Marines. It was a contest between legacy systems and a fully integrated combat architecture. And in that contest, the U.S. Navy demonstrated something unmistakable. Influence in modern conflict is shaped less by the number of troops on the ground and more by the speed of information, the quality of sensors, the precision of targeting, and the discipline to apply force in a limited, controlled, and calculated way. The ability to reach deep, act precisely, and leave almost no visible signature behind remains one of the most powerful forms of deterrence in the modern era. And for any rival power watching closely, the message was hard to miss. The technological gap is no longer a narrow advantage. It is a strategic divide. And in a real confrontation, that divide can decide everything.